Welcome to the Stained Glass Rebel podcast. I'm Shane Russo. I'm your Stained Glass Rebel. And today we have Nathan Branim with us, who is a friend of mine. He's an author. He's a pastor. He's pretty crazy. If you read his book, you'll realize that he's got a past not too dissimilar to mine, but really quite dissimilar to mine. So we'll just get started and let Nathan tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, anything you want to share.
Sure. Well, Shane, first off, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. This is great. You and I went to seminary together, and I can't remember what class we met in, but we struck it up pretty quick, and we did find out that we were just kind of two different individuals, and but I really appreciate your spirit and what you do. And so anyway, yeah, I've been in the ministry now since 2001. Prior to that, I served in the Marine Corps, and I was just in for 4 years. And then I got out and came to Lima, Ohio. At the time, I didn't know that it wasn't Lima, Ohio. It's Lima, Ohio. So, but now I'm an official Lima being with my wife, Julie. We will have been married this November for 20 years. I've got 3 wonderful children. My oldest, Isaac, he just turned 16. He'll have his license shortly. Keep yourselves off the road and be safe here soon. And then our daughter, Elise, is 14 years old. And then my youngest son, Peyton's 12. So our hands right now are full of family, love, life, ministry. And as you mentioned recently, I just finished my first book, which I'm really excited about. That's keeping us busy as well. And just doing a whole lot of things that I believe are advancing the kingdom of God. I have a missions trip to Kenya, Africa coming up at the end of this month now. Happy May 1st. And so we just have a lot going on.
I believe the class that we were in was with Dr. Colleen, and I want to say it was New Testament theology, I believe, like intro to theology or something like that. Yeah. And so just a little bit of background on that story, which is it was an online class, and Dr. Colleen in the first week, now of course she's not going to listen to this, but if she does, just a disclaimer, Dr. Colleen's one of my favorite professors, and she became one of my favorite professors because of this incident. And so she, on her first lecture, the very first week, came down really hard on Calvinists. Like, she put her bias out there, which was good that she put it out there, but she came down really hard. And you and I had I don't know if we'd had some interaction, or if I read something about you, or maybe we had another class or something. I can't remember why I knew that you were a recovering Calvinist, right? And so when we saw that lecture, I went and I sent her an email, or possibly a message or something saying, or I actually might have, I don't know if I made it public or not.
I think you did. It was great.
I basically called her out for saying, I get having a bias, but in this class we have some Calvinists, or you might want to go easy on them. They're And so she then issued an apology to the class, and
she did.
She was great with that. She was always great with allowing people to have the conversations. So, but from that incident, then you and I sort of gelled. We came together because I stood up for, because I bet you probably were never going to say anything about it,
No, I probably wouldn't have.
But you're not nearly as annoying and aggressive as me. So,
it's so funny because I thought, here's this professor, she's in the position of authority, and she really, at first she did kind of use it, I thought she still, I think is very outspoken about Arminianism. And but I was really thankful that you were the one that spoke up. You're like, hey, come on, give the guy a break. Because I think I might've made some comments or something like that. And I think you did step in and say, stuck up for me. So that was really great of you.
And then we'll get to that a little bit here in a minute, why that's kind of a really funny and amazing thing, because, you and I probably couldn't be more different on almost everything, and so, but we came together around that common point of being like, hey man, this is a class with multiple viewpoints, so let's let them breathe a little bit. But man, did she come down hard on Calvinists that day. That was so funny. And it was funny because I'm not a Calvinist, so it was hilarious. But I felt I was like, are we gonna do this? Is this how the class is gonna be? We're just gonna start crapping on theology that we don't agree with. And that was that was a pretty interesting start. It turns out, though, I picked her for another class later on, and she remembered me, obviously.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And she was happy to have me in class, and I was happy to have her. I picked her specifically because the rest of that class went great. It was really good, and she was one of my 3 favorite professors at ATS while we were there.
Yeah, she's good. Her book was really good too that we studied for that.
Oh yeah, Images of Salvation, is that
I believe so.
illustration, yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, that was a great book. And usually when we have a class, or we had a class and we had to use one of the professor's texts, I always cringed a little bit, like, oh no, can we really critique this book?
That's true.
And we did. I had another professor who was in the process of writing a book and had written books, and this was my last year, and there's no way I'd have been able to critique his book because he was not one of my favorite professors. Let's just put it that way. And I'm not going to say who because there's no point. But
well, you're very kind.
Well, everybody who was in that class knows who.
Yeah.
we had a lot of back and forth. And by the way, just anybody listening to this or watching this, if you're in school, I highly recommend you do not Facebook friend your professors while you're in their class. It's probably not going to go well for you. Just personal experience, just let you know it right now. Don't do it, especially if you don't agree with them on a lot of things, and you have a strong personality, and so do they. It just isn't going to work. Interestingly enough, though, he's in my denomination, so I get to see him every year at annual conference. so I don't even get to get away from it.
Yeah, I think I know. Does he play the organ?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay,
but he was
trying to narrow down the choices here.
Well, here, I'll narrow it down for you. He was also a former Marine. You might have had.
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, so we'll just leave it at that, and then move on. But we can talk a little bit more about. Tell me about your experience at Ashland Seminary, because Ashland is, I think it's home to about 70 different denominations in terms of its student body, but it does have a very, it has a history of having a conservative bent, but in the Brethren tradition. So pretty interesting for both of us, I'd think, because we don't come from those traditions.
Right. Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I was raised charismatic Pentecostal.
I'm so sorry.
The way that I came to Ashland and the seminary is I had a mentor that was an alumnus, and he recommended that I try and get into the bachelor exempt program because I don't have an undergrad. And so I applied for that, and I got accepted. And so it was a great experience for me. For whatever reason, Pentecostals, charismatic, they always kind of caricature seminary as cemetery, don't go there, the spirit will be quenched, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it was a total God thing. I found it the exact opposite. Seminary was an amazing thing for me. So for a lot of reasons, not only did I get to meet people like yourself with differing viewpoints and to hear the other side that I hadn't heard, and learn, grow, and develop, but then really help me hone some of my skills that I just wasn't learning, just in ministry. Because when I kind of did seminary non-traditionally in the sense that I didn't go before I started ministry. So as I said at the beginning in the intro, that right when the Marine Corps was my Bible college essentially, which isn't, the best, but I went straight from there into being the director of men's ministries at the Lima Rescue Mission. Did that for 10 years. 2010, I received a call to pastor here at Grace Fellowship Church in Lima, Ohio. And then in 2014, I started my seminary journey. So I got my education way down the line. But Ashland was great for a lot of reasons. I can't think of too many drawbacks, I'm being honest, to going to seminary. I would recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, and so would I. Especially in the United Methodist tradition, they have, and this is probably the same for a lot of different denominations. I don't know them all, but we have multiple paths to licensure and ordination. And if you don't go to seminary, they have course of study, and it's like a 5-year program, in-house program. You know, and I don't know very much about that. I do know it's not nearly as in depth though as seminary. And for me, yeah, similarly, my seminary experience was I was entering into a pretty conservative environment, and even then, even honestly, when I started seminary, I was so left, like even more, like, because you got me right at the beginning, and then over time, I I didn't change my stances, but I mellowed on how I interacted with people with
That's
them.
Good.
But it allowed me, people asked me why didn't I transfer to like Methesco, which is Methodist seminary, and it's pretty liberal. And they say, well, you'll fit better in there. I'm like, I don't want to fit in.
Yeah.
I want to, and I always said that my time at Ashland allowed me to clarify both my positions and my ability to state them.
Yeah.
Because ministry isn't going to be about being surrounded by everybody who's like you.
Hey, that's right.
So if you can learn that skill before you have to before you have to use it, that's all the better. However, having said that, I was fortunate that both of my overseeing pastors were both progressive liberals. So, it was fun. It was fun. But it allowed me to, meet people way different than me. Nobody was like me. I was called a heretic in one class. Somebody in one other class said you should try being a Christian before you enter seminary. And I'm like, yeah, wow. He got removed from my study group, but, but yeah, it's interesting. Like you were doing ministry and then were in seminary. And then for me, I didn't become a pastor until after. Now I was doing different ministry stuff, but I wasn't leading a church, beforehand. And, I don't know that I honestly could have. It's interesting. I didn't know you didn't have an undergrad. I'm glad I didn't know that until just now, because it may have, for me, colored.
Sure, you could have dismissed me and said this unlearned dolt.
Honestly, I really try not to, but I do tend to sometimes have a little bit of an arrogance about education. I mean, I have an education degree. My wife is a teacher. I value education, and so. But I do also recognize that there are multiple paths. Like I took a different path than we're supposed to in my denomination to get my degree, and all of that. So I get it. But yeah, I still go back to that class though, where we met as a formative event in my time at Ashland, to realize that you could be different, way different from somebody, and still both have a commonality and just be friends. And before that, I knew it, but I didn't really practice it much because I tried to just cut out differences, in my life.
Yeah, well, I think, Shane, we're seeing this not just in the religious world and the Christian church. We're seeing this, politically, nationally, globally, is that we are really struggling to come together. And I think even prior to coming to Ashland, God was really teaching me on how to not excise everybody that disagreed with me. Mm-hmm. I was a very caustic Calvinist, a very extreme Calvinist. And I think out of all of the viewpoints, they can be the most acrid and the most ostracizing, the most schismatic, and maybe even the most angry, frankly.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree
with that. I was one of those. And not that I got angry. I just, would stick out my chest and think I knew everything and let you know it. So, but the thing for me is I started to take a lot of hits from people. Obviously, you receive what you have given, right? And so, and you receive the judgment that you've judged. Mm-hmm. So I was a very harsh critic doctrinally of people, and I would seek out arguments. I would seek out debate, which we're told exactly not to do from Paul to Timothy. You don't want to be a person full of debate. I think we all have to grow through that stage. But I started to take a lot of hits. I started to be criticized, and frankly, I didn't like it. And God just ministered to me very gently, and He said, "Nathan, well, you know why you're experiencing this." And I thought about it. Didn't take too long to come up with the answer. Oh yeah, I'm kind of sowing a lot of this disunity and anger and debate and argument. And I just didn't like to live in that. The Bible says that we're to live in peace with all men as much as lies within us, as much as it's possible.
Fake news.
Yeah, right. Fake news. And we are to live in peace in the sense that we're to be anxious and worried about nothing. And I was getting on all these online debates, and I would be up at 2 and 3 in the morning thinking about formulating an answer just to justify myself and to show why I was right. And that was just, I don't believe that was in keeping with the Spirit of Christ. That's not to say that we can't. And here's the thing. I think that we need to create a forum in which we can have healthy debate. We have to be able to discuss vehemently. We see Paul doing this in the New Testament. Generally, the people that aren't on the side of truth, whatever side that is, they're usually the ones that leave in a huff. And so I've always taken the position that, number one, if I do in fact hold the truth, if my position's the right one, well, why am I getting upset that you think you're right? If I think I'm right, I should be able to accept the fact that you're wrong right now, but that ultimately you may come to see the truth. So regardless, my point is that at the beginning of seminary, this really helped to further my advancement in being ironic, being loving to those that don't hold the opposite position. And just to this idea of like isolationism, politically that we'll practice. I remember, you may or may not recall this, but when the Democrats in 2014, 15, 16, as they were building up in their primaries to run against, to continue their rule here in the U.S., I think, it was Hillary Clinton, it was Obama, and some of these others, they were debating. And one of the moderators asked the question, should we talk with North Korea? Do you remember that? And everyone was saying, oh, no, we need to continue, giving them the cold shoulder. Do you remember that question?
No, I don't specifically remember that, but that seems like it would be the default position. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was. But here's the funny thing. Guess what Obama said? Oh, no, we could talk with them. And everyone was like, oh, and now here's just the silly, stupid thing. And here's where politics and not communicating and, isolating one another. Guess who had talks with North Korea? President Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, at one time everyone was like, oh, God forbid that we do that. So my point is this. My point is that we have to be convinced in our own mind about what we believe. And here again, Ashland, my time in ministry has really helped me develop and hone and figure out what I believe. A lot of times I think we get into these arguments because we don't know what we believe, or we simply parrot what we have been taught. So anyway, once we know those things and we're convinced of them and we believe them to be the truth, then I think it enables us to give others the grace that we would want. Shane, here's the thing. I know there are things that you and I disagree on. I know there are things that I believe that are sin that you believe are right. But the point is, I want you to treat me the way I want to be treated. And so the point is, if I were to be in something that maybe wasn't quite right, well, how do I think you're going to come over to my side? Or how do I think by pointing my finger and looking down my long spiritual nose at you? No. You do it the way Jesus did it. First off, Jesus was rarely on the offensive. And here's what we have this whole movement currently, Shane, and I'm sure you're aware of this, of Christian apologetics. And they're saying, oh, we need to sniff out the truth. We need to be, we need to sniff out error rather. And when we find it, we need to destroy it. We need to destroy the people, the person. And that is, I don't believe that's in keeping with the true nature. And obviously we get the word apologetics, or making a defense of or an answer of, from Peter when he says, apologia, be ready always to give an answer of the hope that lies in you with peace, with, I think it says reverence and fear. And here's what, is that right? I mean,
I think so.
Yeah. And my point is this, that we have totally strayed from the nature of Christ on issues of which we disagree with. Part of that is we take some things that Paul said, we isolate them, or some of the things that Jesus did, and we isolate them and say, look, see what Jesus did. Incidentally, one of those things we look at are, say Jesus, making a whip with cords and, throwing everybody out of the temple. Well, we point to that one thing, forget everything else that he did. We say, see, look, Jesus was all about violence. Jesus was all about hurting people, or, go ahead and take up arms because of that. And frankly, it's silly. Or we'll look at Paul and Paul said, well, these Judaizers, I wish they would emasculate themselves. We say, well, look at that. Well, Paul was against these folks, but yet we disregard the fact that Paul was weeping over those who had become enemies of the cross. And I think, Shane, because we have removed, true love, and I think true love is so much more than just speaking the truth. Does that ring true with you? Listen,
it does, yeah.
And this is all we have become as talk, Shane. We've become, well, I can tell you the truth, and we have said that that's all that love is. But it's interesting in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, when we have the characteristics and qualities of love, I don't see anywhere in that, or it's very hard, at least not directly. You have to come up with subsequent conclusion that love is tough love only. 1 Corinthians 13 does not say that love is tough love. And by tough love, we get this from our baby boomers. God bless them. Thank the Lord for them, and the baby busters, that I have to show you tough love. And granted, that was their generation. That's what they had to do. And all they would do is point their finger at you, and they would say, this is the truth. If you don't agree with it, I'm going to cut you off. And that was it. I don't believe that is the spirit of and the nature of the new covenant. I don't believe that is. So we have to have a forum. Sorry about this. This is my long form answer here. We have to have a space.
That's the point of these. I love it. Keep going.
Yeah. So this is the space in which you and I have to discuss. We have to, and here's just another verse, which you're very familiar with. Paul said, I become all things to all men that I might win them. Let me tie that together with Solomon, because he said this, the one who wins souls is wise. We have taken, evangelists like myself, we have used that really we thought to our advantage, but it's been to our disadvantage. So we said, well, we just need to win souls in any way, shape, and form. That simply means that I need to tell people they're dying and going to hell. Now listen, that can include that. But I think there's something that is more important in Paul's statement of becoming all things to all men and winning souls is wise. And that is that it's easy to just spout off truth. It's easy just to say, this is the way that it is. That is not wisdom. Because the way that you win a soul is that you have to get them to understand that you truly love them, that your desire for them is best. And then ultimately, if what you believe is true, they're going to come over to your side and your way of seeing it. But prior to that, I think it's just hollow rhetoric. And I think we need to be so captivated and embody the Spirit of Christ that it will be an irresistible apologetic. And we can win souls that way. I just think that's how it has to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You said something when you were talking about the North Korea thing. I remember when Trump started talking and things started moving along with that, and I literally went to my friend who's a pastor, and I said, if Donald Trump creates world peace, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do with myself, to be honest with you. Like I said, I have no idea how this is going to work.
I know.
But when you said that, it made me think, you said the word destroy a couple times. You see it all the time online, but in our political rhetoric, and even it's now really in our religious rhetoric too, this idea that we can't talk to our enemy because we need to just destroy them. We need to snuff it out. We need to get rid of it. And so the idea that as a culture, we would say, no, we can't talk to North Korea. We have to keep giving them the cold shoulder, as you said, and we have to, basically wipe them off the planet, is indicative of this idea that we have to destroy our enemy and not converse with our enemy, and again, that is so anti-Christ. That is like opposite of a Christ-like attitude that it saddens me. It breaks my heart to see that this charge being led by Christians,
Yeah.
it really, I go, do you hear yourself? Like, do you hear what you're saying? But yeah, that's where we are. And I think for you and me and our ability to have discourse, in the midst of so much difference, is that we never have once focused on the difference. We have discussed them, we've talked about them, but we've never focused on them as the foundation of our relationship. Like, we never said we have to agree on anything, honestly, to have a relationship. Because for us, and you didn't directly just say it, but you implied it greatly, that for us the common core is Jesus and the love that comes through as followers of Christ. That is the foundational starting point for us. And when you start there, the rest of it exists, but it doesn't, it's not a deal breaker. Like, I can let you be you and you can let me be me, but we're both on the same side of love.
That's right.
And so, yeah.
It is. And I think one of these, I mentioned kind of this apologetic movement. There's just, case in point, there's a guy, his name is funny name. Well, at least to me, I shouldn't say that to be culturally correct. His name's Cy 10 Bruggengate. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce it. Anyway.
I don't know that.
Yeah, but you could probably look up Cy and SYE in apologetics. It's actually kind of cool. I wish I would have thought about it, but it's not really the best kind of Christian principle. He's got an ichthus in the shape of a shark. It's like swallowing another fish. I mean, I don't believe that is, again, we shouldn't be destroying our enemies. And now listen, Jesus did it simply enough by loving and giving answers. I mean, because he was wise. I mean, he did it to the point that when he spoke, number one, they knew he loved them, but he gave them answers that they couldn't argue against. And he was always tactful. He was always tactful. I want you to think about this, Shane. John 4, you and I, we've probably preached on it many times or heard it preached and taught. John 4, the woman comes to the well. She has, maybe not a prostitute, but I mean, she's had enough husbands to almost be one, right? So Jesus stays at the well, and we kind of assume that she's there because no one else is there, but Jesus is there. Mm-hmm. He meets this woman at the well. She has a sordid past, to say the least. He talks with her. This was in a day of, just extreme chauvinism, right? And
we don't do that anymore.
Right, yeah, I mean, that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, a day of misogyny that we will never, I don't think, ever know. And he talks to her first off. But then this is the crazy thing, Shane, because again, we're getting to this love and truth thing. He points out her sin. Think about that. I want you just to think about anything or any time that you've done that or I've done that. And listen, just as a stupid young kid, I've done that plenty of times, like, hey, you're a sinner, blah, blah, blah. And he says, listen, you've had 5, the sixth isn't even your husband, you're living with them. And then they go on to discuss religion. Mm-hmm. She's like, well, hey, we Samaritans, we worship here and you worship there. And Jesus says, well, listen, you really don't know what you're worshiping, but the time is coming, and now is it the Father seeking those that worship him in spirit and truth. And listen, this, I think, is a perfect pattern for believers to follow in discourse with those that disagree. And we can figure out whether we're successful or unsuccessful, because here's what happened, Jane, is that not only did she go away encouraged, not only was she not offended, she was converted to proclaim what Jesus had just exposed in her life. She's like, he just came and told me every sin I ever committed. I don't think we have any other testimony in the Bible where someone was so ecstatic about their sin being revealed. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Because he had the ability to expose it in a way and in a culture and a climate that let her know that she was safe and that he could work her through this. He could forgive her. And then it says that she went on, she told the whole village, and it said that some believed. I mean, that I think is the ultimate the epitome of a soul winner.
I love that story, and I love thinking. See, what I like to do is I like to think about the aftermath of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so There's nothing in there. Now, you can't make these arguments from silence, obviously. That's something we learned early on in seminaries. You don't make an argument from silence, but I like to think about the silence. I like to think about
absolutely
nothing in there said that yes, she converted. Absolutely. She was proclaiming what Jesus had told her, but nothing in there proves that then she did go home and change like the living situation right away, right? So, and I always use that. I always take that for me personally to say this. Yes, we can call out sin. We absolutely can. But involvement in the kingdom is not precluded by a complete and utter absence of sinful behavior. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And even at that point, Jesus really let her define the sin. She knew ahead of time, like when they're having that conversation, she brings it up and he just clarifies it, right? Says, yeah, I know. And so in that, like, here's I'm getting to this point here. In my system, in the UMC, obviously, if you've been paying any attention, it's gotten very contentious, and there's likely going to be a split soon. But it's over the issue of homosexuality, human sexuality, and all of that. And for me personally, obviously, you know where I stand on this. I don't believe that homosexuality is sinful. But even if you do, and this is what I say, even if you do believe that, an exclusion of people from being fully involved in the life of the church based on sinful behavior, that's honestly never been a condition. Especially, like, I say every time I mention it from the pulpit, I say every one of us has something that we know we do that is sinful, right? Yeah. And we know it, and we want to turn from it, but we don't, or we continue to do it even after we've, you know what I mean? Like, every one of us has something, but I get to stand up here and preach to you because mine isn't public, or maybe I don't even necessarily recognize it or whatever. Yeah. I said, but because theirs is public, or we can ferret theirs out, now all of a sudden we get to exclude them from being fully involved in the life of this church, or even in the kingdom. And to me, it's not even about whether it's sin or it isn't sin. It doesn't matter to me in terms of how the church should react to their involvement in it, because even then, all it littered throughout. You can start to make some of an argument that Paul probably wouldn't have been okay with that, but even with that, Paul wrote his letters to people who were sinning, and he said, "Yeah, don't do that." But we have no proof that they changed it. Yeah, so we can say, here's what you should be doing, but in the meantime, continue to do the work. You know.
Yeah. But let me draw, if you wouldn't mind, I want to just draw a quick parallel here.
Yeah.
Between some of the issues that we're facing right now and what we've seen in kind of our society. You and I, Shane, weren't alive during the Vietnam War. We don't know anything about the aftermath. I mean, we're really blessed and privileged that, even if you were probably, what year were you born?
I was born in 1978. Okay,
so we're the same age.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so you and I, we saw, we saw the Iraq War, Desert Storm. We were young, we were in youth group then. And then, we've had Operation Enduring Freedom. And the thing that we were blessed with is seeing the troops, no matter what service, being honored and respected for their service.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you go back a generation and you see the ones who fought for our freedom. They were trashed, they were maligned, they were neglected. And it was a shame. So as they were coming back from Vietnam, they were just treated with just such indignity that it begs description. And I think now, and so if you take that kind of paradigm where we're destroying our own, really, I think, and it's odd because that was so many years ago, but I think we're seeing that now in the church. I think we're seeing that not just with homosexuality, but we're seeing that with leaders who fail. Shane, the thing is pastors, this, we're on the front lines. Yeah. I saw this real cool picture. It had a pastor, it's supposed to be a pastor, and he's kneeling praying with a congregant. He's got like 30 knives in his back. The congregant has one. You know, and so, like you said, we're all dealing with some sin. I don't care who you are. And now some may be more public, others may be more private, but we're all dealing with it. And so for you and I to treat one another like the idiots, frankly, did to our vets coming home from the war, and we're seeing that now. And I think it's as bad as it has ever been. And I'm thinking of people like Pastor James McDonald from Chicago. Granted, it sounds like he was a jerk. You know what I mean? Mark Driscoll, you know, he's fallen. You know, I mean, we have just destroyed them. And so here's my hope is that we are moving through that, and we are going to begin to honor. I mean, these are fallen heroes. They have fallen prey to the enemy, and we have just kicked them while they're down. We've been shoving salt in their wounds, and we really have to figure out how we're going to move forward with these great men and women who haven't made, granted, they haven't made the best choices. They've made mistakes. They've sinned. Well, duh, we all have. And so we've got to figure out, and let's just be clear, and I'm sure you agree with this, that I think we first have to be violent with the sin in our own lives. That's where it needs to start. We need to see that we've all got a plank in our eye. And once we're spiritually awake enough to see that, then we don't care much about the speck that's in our brothers or sisters. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think when Paul talks in Galatians 6:1, he talks about those that are overcome or overtaken by a sin. And I love that language because it truly is. They've been overcome by it, right? Sometimes of their own, not of their own doing. And that's kind of the tough part. We always just want to blame and not consider kind of mitigating circumstances, but be that as it may. Galatians 6:1, if you see a brother or sister overtaken a sin, you which are spiritual restore. And I think he gives that descriptor of you which are spiritual. I think truly spiritual people, well, first off, was Jesus and is Jesus. But then it was Paul, right? Mm-hmm. They have to restore someone in the spirit of meekness and humility. And here's why. Considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. And we have to regain this spirit of reconciliation with our brothers and sisters. And hey, listen, even if at the end of the day we can't come to an agreement, well, then we agree to disagree. And then we may not even, but I think here is the true test of this entire thing, Shane, is can I truly love you? And I think, and we have to look here first, is the true test of love. What does your heart say? If I can dismiss you with cool intellectualism, I don't know that I ever loved you. I don't know that I've ever had a relationship with you. Mm. And if you don't mind, I want to illustrate this from my life here just recently in the pastorate. Just last year in 2018, we had what really was a mini split at our church. We're going through some development. We're going through leadership changes. We're going through some doctrinal tweaking. And we had
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll give it to you really briefly. We have gone from being more conservative to more expressive in worship. That really was the change, and not crazy. Okay. So we went through a change like that. We had a mini split. And the thing is, the pastor that hurt me the most was these people whom I had loved, cared for. I'd buried their family. I'd married their family members, done all these things for. Some who told me, Nathan, you're not only my pastor, you're my friend, told me, you're just like, I love you like a son. Look me straight in the eye.
Yeah.
You know, these same people would leave and they wouldn't tell me. They wouldn't emotionally give me the time of day. And so I ask rhetorically, did they love me? And it's clear that we have had a tremendous lack of love. And I truly am not bitter or angry about that. I feel for them because Obviously they could have, we all need to grow in love. I think they could have grown in love a little more, but I think that is the true test, Shane, of am I involved and engaged emotionally enough with this person that I can tell them the truth? And depending on whether or not they agree or disagree, do we need to part ways here? And if we do, can I be honest enough and love you enough to tell you, even through tears, that, listen, we have to disagree here, and I've got to let you do you, and I'm going to do me. But at the end of the day, if I'm a believer, if I truly am a Christian, I'm going to love you. I'm going to continue to pray for you. I'm going to continue to bless your life in some way, shape, or form. And we may not be able to sit down and break bread in the same fellowship, but hallelujah, thank the Lord, we have different churches. We have denominations. We have all these things that we can express our love, be who we need to be, and follow Jesus. I truly believe that.
I think that ghosting a church, which is when they leave and they don't say anything and they don't, I think that is one of the worst things that a person can do. Because if think about it, if we did that in any other situation, we would absolutely hammer that person. Be like, but
we don't carry anything like that over into the work world. You know what I mean? We're just so kind of duplicitous on this thing.
But it's natural. It's not questioned in the church as behavior, and then they'll ghost the church, but then they'll talk to church members about what's going on because they want to know, but they just don't. Oh man, that's the worst. It really is.
It is.
You said something that made me think about a question. You and me, one
Sure.
of our biggest points of difference is probably our belief or our acceptance or our view of spiritual warfare.
Sure.
And which actually made reading your book difficult at times for me because it's laced with that. And we'll get to your book here in a second.
Sure, that's fine.
But I knew that. I knew that. We knew that about each other. And so I kept reading it and I kept going through it because you're my friend and I was very curious about how this has formed you and stuff. But the idea of spiritual warfare, if you subscribe, if you believe that, if you really authentically believe that the enemy and the enemy's minions are attacking and they are doing whatever they can, how many people that ascribe to that belief do not live as though that is a true idea? Like they say, I believe that, and they talk in language like the enemy this, the enemy that, but then they want to attack the person and not the sin or the demonic force, the evil behind that behavior. Do you know what I mean? Like we want to destroy. Absolutely. And I was thinking about when you're talking about Mark Driscoll and those guys, like, and honestly, I would be one that says Mark Driscoll was an ass. He was not a good, he's not a good person, but my theology leads me to a place where I can talk about his character in a way that is absent of a spiritual attack. Right. But like, if you believe in spiritual warfare, you believe the enemy got his hooks into Mark Driscoll and this helped him be the person he was, why would you ever attack Mark Driscoll?
Yes.
Obviously you want to help him through and you want to help a person who's struggling in this way, but why would you attack them personally and destroy their lives and make them go through hell when your own theology says that there's a bigger, more maleficent force behind this, right? Why wouldn't you spend your energy attacking that than the person? And so when you said that, it really made me, it goes, yeah, like if you believe that, it's almost comical that you would attack the person ever in that situation. Like I'd be more likely to do that, because my theology doesn't give me a platform to say that the enemy is orchestrating all of this. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Shane, one of the ways that I kind of simplify what Christianity is amongst other ways is I'll say that as believers, we're going from a position of hypocrisy to less hypocrisy. That is our pattern of growth. You demonstrated it right there. One of my mentors said, and I think brilliantly, he said, if it has a face on it, it's not your enemy. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So if it has a face on it, it's not your enemy. So we are, and I think this just goes right in line with everything we've been talking about. We are growing out of kind of this childish stage where we say we believe, oh yeah, well, we believe the forces of darkness are working and Satan is attacking, but yet in the next breath, we're turning and we're really destroying the person. So it is a pattern of growth. And here's where it has to start, Shane. It has to start with you and I. Because we are being judged by a different standard, James 3:1, we are judged by a more harsh standard. You and I have to lead the charge on how this works. Mm-hmm. And I think that takes place when you and I can demonstrate it, when you and I can sit down and say, listen, here are differences. Where can we agree? Where do we disagree? And how do we move forward? Can we move forward? We have to do it. We have to.
And that I couldn't agree more with that. And that's really the purpose of things like this. My blog, the videos I put out there, they have two purposes. One, to help include people who are currently being actively excluded in ways, particularly in my own denomination. But the other equal calling for all these things that I do is to say, how can we disagree very adamantly, but still come together in it? I believe that you can completely disagree on almost everything and still come together and work together to make something better happen, right? And actually, my lay leader, he's leaving our church to go be a pastor in the American Baptist denomination. He's very conservative. He's he grew up in the Baptist denomination. He and I, again, differ so greatly on a lot of things, but most people wouldn't know it unless we actively talk about those things, because when we come together, it's all about the work at hand, and we both, just like you and me, he and I are rooted in the love of God and the love of other people, so much that those issues are issues, and we've had some pretty adamant conversations about those together. But when it comes then to what does any of that matter in our expression of love to other people, and that gets me to this idea of belief and living. Like you were, I don't care what you believe if it doesn't cause you to, hold on. I don't care what you believe as long as it allows you to help others and help this world, right? If it doesn't do that, then I'm going to take issue with your belief.
Sure.
And I will call that out. But there are so many things we can believe that have no real impact on the ability to do that. If it does, but you said it, we have these beliefs, but they don't connect with our living. Like, they don't connect with our lives. And I think we're starting to see that fray across the board. Like, we're starting to be able to clearly identify that disconnect. It wasn't there in the 50s and 60s, the heyday of the church in this country, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, because cultural Christianity, it didn't matter that your life didn't match up with the going to church on Sunday, because everybody did that. It was just the way it was. But we're not in that place anymore, with the church getting smaller and things not, I would say dying. The church isn't dying, it's just transforming. But we're now back to a point where if you're going to be here, it's got to mean something. And it's not, and it can't just be saying, I believe this thing. Okay, great. So what? What does it matter in your life? What does it matter in my life that you believe that thing? And I think that's where it gets down to for you and me, is our beliefs are rooted in a desire to bring the kingdom of God into this world and make this place better, help God make this place better. So all that other stuff, we can debate it and talk about it and disagree with it and even get angry about it. But ultimately, is that going to stop you and me from getting together to help try to bring this good news to the world? I don't think so.
No, I agree. I think I made this statement recently in a service, and it had to do with the Catholic Church and their stance on abortion. We are Protestants because we protested against the Catholic Church. Yeah. But I think one of the greatest organizations right now leading the charge against infanticide is the Catholic Church. And listen, I disagree with many of their doctrines and their tenets, and however, I will join with them to save these infants' lives. And so it just goes to the point that you're saying that we have to be concerned with the greater goal. And again, that's not to say we overlook the issues, because we still hold our faith, we still hold our principles, but there are things that we need to be able to work together on. And if we don't, we are going to see the church. Granted, we haven't seen the conclusion of our nation yet, thank the Lord. But right now, I mean, we are a tragically divided nation, and there's so many factors to that, you know. And we will just see that happen, and God forbid that does.
Well, I think the issue, you said it. We have our principles and our beliefs. I think what we've gotten to is to the point where we are unable to let others have theirs as well. Like principles and beliefs, I think are unique. Like, yes, I can hold to these things dearly, and I hold to them dearly because they make an impact on me, and they impact the way I live. They change the way I live. They inform the way that I live. And yes, obviously, if it's very important to me, I would like you to be that way too. However, we have lost the ability to let people be themselves, to let people exist, and then come around that greater commonality to say, you know, because, and this is where you see certain things legislated out that probably shouldn't be, simply because there's the choice in the matter, like, and whether you want it to happen or not. Like, I don't want abortions to happen. I absolutely do not. I am totally pro-life in that way. That said, I don't necessarily think it should be legislated out. That's a very big discussion. But for me personally, my principles, my beliefs on this are totally pro-life from beginning to end.
Yes.
And I will do everything in my power as a pastor to make it so that people would rather not make that choice. But the choice, right? So, but like, and so we can discuss whether or not it should be or shouldn't be a choice. Sure. We don't have to do that here, but I'm just saying, like, but like, so you and I actually come together on the idea of wanting to prevent abortions from happening. We don't want them. I think probably you and I would disagree on the method that we would use to do that, but the bigger goal, though, we're still in line together with the bigger goal, and so we can come around that. And that would for me would be, we could do work together on that to see how we could do that. And that's the thing, and though, because our belief informs how we live and we behave, but I'm still letting you be you and your belief, and you're letting me be me and mine, and we come around the greater goal.
That's right. And I think forums like this, Shane, provide a place where we can sharpen one another. You know, the famous Bible verse, iron sharpens iron. And that only happens when there is an exchange of ideas.
Sure. Yeah.
And we have to do this.
All right. So let's shift gears here a little bit, because we've gotten a little deep and I love it. But let's talk about your book.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your book. Tell us a little bit about what the book is, what the impetus behind writing it was, and what you plan to do with it.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for making space for this.
Yeah,
well, anyway, so Shane, I came to know the Lord at the age of 16, and it was on the heels of getting mixed up with drugs and just the wrong crowd. And it took me down very quickly. And I didn't get messed up with like crack or heroin or any, you know, kind of those harder drugs. But regardless, the drugs took me down very quickly. And so I came to know the Lord at the age of 16 in 1994. And my turnaround was radical. It was quick and it was extreme. And so I went from this kind of dopey teen to being this really on fire kid for Christ, and sharing my faith in school and doing things like that. And so as far as the impetus for writing the book, well, I developed a love for biographies and autobiographies very early in my walk. And so I've been reading them, I've been listening to them, and they've just been a real source of spiritual strength, encouragement. I use them in devotional time. And so it almost is a natural, you know, next step for me to write my, you know, my first memoir at this point. And so that's what Adventures in Evangelism, the testimony of a timid evangelist is. It's a memoir from obviously a little backstory before I come to know the Lord in 1994 up through my Marine Corps service in 2001. Give stories about, how I serve the Lord and things like that. And I just told someone this the other day that my book is maybe even more of a handbook or guide on how to hear the voice of God, the ways that I have experienced him, wrapped up in my own personal story. So that's kind of the skinny on what it's about. And the reason that I wrote it was I've wanted to write books for years. And by the way, this is kind of one of the main takeaways for me at seminary. As you know, brother, we had to read and write a lot. I mean, that's all you do. I mean, it's really what it's about. So that gave me a real good foundation how to write and reference and do these different things. And so that was one of the kind of tools that I gained from seminary. But since I wanted to write, I put some work into this. I had an idea. Originally, the title was going to be Adventures in Teenage Evangelism. I changed that because I wanted to appeal to a broader audience. But so I had been working on this for years. I cannot honestly remember exactly when I started on it, but last year, at the beginning of the year, I probably had about 5,000 words put into this book and some ideas. And now this is interesting. In being a charismatic Pentecostal, I still believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I still believe that they're active and operative. I was texting a good friend who I also dedicate the book to. His name's Blake Fierce. The last text that he and I corresponded with one evening, he said, "The devil's not going to like what you do when you get up in the morning." And I, even for me being around, kind of the sensational gifts of the Spirit and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, wow, that's what in the world's going to happen? Is Goliath going to show up and I'm going to kill him? I just didn't know. So I'm like, okay, whatever, Lord. I just kind of shelved it and went to bed. Well, I'm not kidding. At 2 a.m., I woke up and I felt impressed of God to write this specific book. And again, I had like 5 or 6 other book ideas, but it was this book. And I just began to write like a man possessed, I believe, with the purpose and plan of God. And so from January, February 2018 to just late last year, probably November, December, put the last ideas on the cover design and finished it up. So that's the kind of the little synopsis of the book and the purpose for the reason I wrote it.
Yeah, I think in the review that I left for you on Amazon for the book, I said it basically, yeah, if you're an evangelical, you're gonna love this book. If you're a charismatic, if you're a gift of the Spirit kind of person, you're gonna love this book. If you're not, you might find some parts of it hard to read, but it's still an important book. I think.
Well, thank you.
I do. I think it's good. I think anytime we can hear somebody's story about how they got to where they are, it's important. Whatever that story is, even if the story's tragic, I think hearing this, that's what we have. And especially as pastors, that is our greatest tool, is to tell stories. And Jesus, that's how he taught, by telling stories. It's funny, like you're talking about, and I read it, your drug use as a young person, and you ever see people you just know they did drugs when they were younger?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like that's not you. That's not you. You do like, it's like, to learn that about you is surprising because you are super clean cut. You are like white bread American. Like you are.
That's so true. No,
you don't look like life has been tough. Like you started out rough. Now, me on the other hand, I really didn't do drugs as a kid. I didn't even smoke any pot until I was an adult, and even then it was for a short amount of time. Like I haven't spent a lot of time drinking in my life. But I clearly look like I've been ridden a lot harder than you.
I don't know about that, but
I do.
You're being kind.
But yeah, I think one of the best parts of the book, if you don't mind me just putting a spoiler out there, because it's early on in the book, is the story you tell about your your grandmother, basically praying and calling that out on you, just saying I read that and I thought about my own grandma, who was totally the opposite of that. My grandma was great. She was a loving, caring person, but my grandma was, I think she would have considered herself a Christian, but honestly, she wasn't having most of it. And my grandma would never have done anything like that for me, but my grandma gave me so much life advice
Oh, that's cool.
That changed and informed, again, like very similarly, informed who I would become later on. And I still think of things like don't lie, cheat, or steal. That was the one thing she, like, seriously, if I remember 3 things she ever said, it was don't lie, cheat, or steal, you know? So as I read the story, I think the power in a story comes from the ability to hear somebody else's and see your own in it.
And absolutely.
And that story, in everything else in that book, it really had that ability to do that. So I think your book is useful to anybody, simply because the stories that you tell, we can see our own story within it. And I think that is just I think that's the mark of a good writer and a good storyteller.
Well, thank you, brother. Your words were very kind to me. And just so you know, and just to kind of ease a little tension maybe that you felt in writing that review, because I think you did use the word cringe. It's so funny. I had a book signing a couple weekends ago. My sister, bless her, she made a surprise trip. She's 2 hours away. She showed up, and she said, every time I read in your last chapter, Marine Corps spam, about how you spam like the entire Marine Corps. And, and she's like, I just cringed when I read you were coming in the next day. So anyway, it was a lot of that stuff was to be intentional and to say, listen, here's how I did it. You know, some of it's funny, some of it's cringeworthy, and intentionally so.
I read that bit and I was like, dude, you're smarter than that. What is going on? That did not happen.
No, you're so right. You're so right. Yeah.
Like, of course, I've done things, and people are like, what? Come on, you're smart.
Exactly.
Sometimes we lose our intelligence for a minute, though. So you mentioned earlier that you're going to Kenya, and I think you posted a picture on your Instagram about I think it was your visa, and so which was, I was like, oh, so what are you doing there? What's the point of that trip?
Yeah, well, you know, Shane, this is kind of a crazy thing. This was late last year. Had something on Facebook that had never happened to me before. We all get those, you know, the crazy friend request, you know, from the fake girls or whatever, people you don't know.
Oh, they are my friends. I don't know about you, but yeah, every one of them.
So I'm not kidding. So multiple people will attest to this. I probably had last year, I don't know how many friends that I had, but I got over, I think, 800 to 1,000 friend requests, unsolicited, 100%, from international people. It was I don't know how it happened. I have never met anyone that ever had this happen to them before, but I got hundreds of requests. So anyway, that being said, I friended some of them. I just kind of, you know, weeded them out, and I didn't take all of them. My ego doesn't need that. But anyway, I just went through and I just kind of picked some. And then, but anyway, one of those was a guy that has become my friend. And interestingly enough, I didn't even know how this worked, but he has a loose connection to an international ministry here in Lima. So that's probably how he friended me.
Sure.
But I developed a relationship with him. He's in Kenya. That organization is Teens for Christ here in Lima. They do their international meeting over in Kenya every year. It's just kind of more centrally located for them. And they meet with leaders from Nepal, India, Philippines, and some other places there, Uganda, I think. And so they invited me to go to speak to their leadership. So we're doing that, but I'm really excited about the first leg of our trip. We're going over to minister. It's called Revival and Restoration Church International there in Nairobi. And obviously they're proclaiming the gospel. They're reaching out, you know, with charity and things. And then also another organization called House of Confidence. They're working with kids in schools, orphans, AIDS affected kids, and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be doing charity ministry. We'll be doing some, if you will, revival ministry, some leadership ministry. So I'm really excited. This will be my first time to Africa. And the first time for me, just going kind of under my own auspices, in the sense that the first part of this trip will be myself and one of my church members, not connected to any other ministry besides what we do here at the church. So looking forward to it.
That's awesome. I was curious. I was curious about that. You have definitely ramped up your your social media presence, recently. And I think that's good. It's especially for me, because it's like reconnecting with an old friend, man, I hope somebody contacts me and lets me go do something fun like that. That'd be great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. And, just on the social media piece there, brother, part of that is, it may not seem like it, but the Lord knows it's true. I am not a good self-promoter. I've never liked doing it. However, because of, just kind of the way that I felt like God led me to do this book, I feel like, well, if God gave me this, then I need to be faithful to do my best to get it out there. And so just to go back to the question that I didn't answer, what are my hopes for it? Ultimately, thinking about the purpose of it, Shane, I really truly have a desire for people to experience this abundant life that Jesus gave me. And in the midst of my foibles, my faults that I clearly lay out, I don't hold any of it back in the book. That, even though I probably was an idiot, evangelistically speaking, I wasn't, always doing the right thing. My heart has always been for people to experience what I've experienced. And so I want to get it into as many hands as possible, whether they agree or disagree. Obviously, my ideal reader is, like you said, probably an evangelical, probably somebody that wants to go and share their faith, probably someone that really has a desire to know the voice of God. Those are my ideal readers, but I'm hoping that the story and maybe some of the ways that I've framed it would be appealing to those that aren't the ideal reader.
See, and that explanation of evangelism is the best one. The idea that you have this thing and you want other people to experience it, but you're not going to do that through a track. You're not going to do that. You're not going to do that by you're certainly not going to do that by saying you better change or you're going to go to hell. That is not. No, you say, I have this great, amazing thing. I want others to experience it. I'm a pluralist, and anybody listening to that, the traditional pluralism is that all religions are true. Well, I don't believe they're all true. I believe all religions are incomplete. But people are like, well, how can you be that and still be a Christian pastor? And I'm like, because my way, the way that I have, the things that I've been given, the experience I have in Jesus and in Christianity is I want everybody to feel that way. Now, I recognize that not everybody's going to, and people are going to experience some of these same things in their own tradition. But for me, that's how I can get out there and I can talk about it, and that's how I can be passionate about it. It's interesting, as you were talking about it, I was thinking evangelism, and then I stopped myself because I went, everybody's an evangelist. Everybody is an evangelist about something. I was just literally thinking about the number of people who wouldn't talk about God or who wouldn't talk about their faith or their excitement in the faith or whatever, but have been posting nonstop about Game of Thrones.
There you go.
Or Endgame.
Endgame.
Both franchises I absolutely love, by the way. I'm caught up on Game of Thrones, and I saw Endgame. I love them, and I will evangelize those till the cows come home too.
There you go.
That said, anybody who says they're against evangelism or they hate evangelism doesn't realize how evangelism works. Everybody's an evangelist about something.
Right.
It's just, what are we choosing to evangelize? And so that's where I will call out people's, what I would say, superfluous evangelistic tendencies.
Yes.
I go, that's great that you love Game of Thrones. That's great that you love Endgame. And I'll sit here and I'll have theological conversations about both of those and say, here's where I see God in those. That said, for me, it always comes back to, how does it change your life? What's it making you do? And is there any way that you can use that to make somebody else move forward in theirs as well? That's evangelism. You have this thing, you want others to have it, and you're not going to do that by telling a person how horrible they are. You're going to do that by saying, this is amazing, you should experience this too, and then eventually they'll be convicted for their horribleness. That's
a great point. And I think you're describing it in marketing terms, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because you think about it, if I want someone to have what I want to give them, I'm not going to make them feel bad about themselves or whatever. Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Just think about how weight loss, all the weight loss industry is huge, multi-billion dollars. And they don't sell those by saying you're a fat piece of crap.
That's right.
You need our stuff. They're like,
that's right.
If you have this, you will have these benefits. Yeah, the underlying thing is you're a fat piece of crap and you should change, but we're not going to tell you it that way because you'll never buy our product.
Yeah.
And honestly, from a marketing standpoint, the church has got to get away from telling people they're fat pieces of crap and start telling them here are the benefits of what we have. And eventually they will realize, that I want to change. I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. And it's just, we're going to get off on we're going to spend another hour here doing that. But I am so glad, Nathan, that you did this. I was really happy to invite you on here to do this. And for me personally, it's just added a lot of context to a person I already kind of knew,
Awesome. Well, Shane, thanks so much for having me. And just, you've been so kind, and I really appreciate you. So thanks for having me on the Stained Glass Rebel.
So kind, something I've never been accused of being before. So that's nice. So we have actual evidence now that somebody, at least one person, thinks that I can't.
Eyewitness testimony. Yeah.
So when I post the video, there will be a link probably in the description.
Okay.
Everywhere that I put it. If you're listening to this on podcast, when I share that, I'll put a link too. But if you don't want to click the link and you just go to Amazon and search for Adventures in Evangelism by Nathan Branim,
there you go.
Then you will find his book, and I recommend that everybody read that and leave him a review, even if you think it's crap.
Make sure it's 5-star. Watch this video.
5-star crap review.
You got a nice smile.
Those are the best. Yeah, you can trash it as long as you say it's 5 stars.
There you go.
I'm not trying to stack the deck or anything, and I don't get any kickback from that. So I really just think you should read the book. It's a good book, and Nathan's a good dude. Nathan, I thank you for coming out, and I will be talking to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane.
All right. Take it easy.